So let's get started. My name is Rosemary Landeweert, and I work in the qualitative team in Ipsos, very much dedicated to curation, and I'm going to be taking you through the webinar today. Now, with everything that's going on today, you may actually be thinking that it's maybe not the best time to do research. So consumers are not behaving as they normally would, stocking up on lots of products, spending lots of time at home, therefore also doing more home cooking, more baking, more do-it-yourself projects. So lots of things that are out of the ordinary maybe. And also things can change any day again, coming out of the lockdown. So you may be thinking that it might not be the best time to start building new strategies or initiatives based on that, right? At the same time, though, you don't want to be doing nothing and risk losing touch with your target group. If you don't do anything, you might miss out when the new normal starts to form. So you want to be part of that. And what we'd like to show you today is that actually it's quite a good time to be doing research. Not only the traditional research that you might be familiar with already, but a new form of research in the form of curation. And we'd like to introduce this to you today and to share the experiences of those who have already started using it. So following my introduction, Emma Grant from Ipsos Global is going to share a bit more about what exactly curation is and how Ipsos Global looks at it. Then Marion Hoek-Koudenberg from Under Armour is going to share and inspire us with how Under Armour is using curation to decode cultures and to be prepared in local markets. Then Anne Kranix from Ipsos UK is going to share how GSK has been using curation to find their way in the abundance of information around COVID-19. Patricia Verhulst from Ipsos NL is then going to share her thoughts on how to find your way in the abundance of information for new opportunities that you can play into as the new normal starts forming. And lastly, we have Janneke, who is going to give a sneak peek into how Nutricia has been using curation ongoingly and how it's really become part of their business process. Now you can, of course, ask questions to the speakers. I would like to ask you to use the comments box for that, and time allowing, we will ask 1 or 2 questions following each speaker and then some other ones at the end. So let me start by handing over to Emma.
Great, thank you so much, and hi everyone. It's great to be here with you today to talk about what curation is and to give you our perspective on how we're helping our clients to deal with this abundance of information that they have, especially in these crazy times that we're living in. So if we just go over to the next slide, for years at Ipsos, when we've been talking to our clients, do you mind just going to the next slide? We've been hearing that businesses like yours, a lot of organizations are dealing with an influx of information from a complex set of sources. And you can go ahead to the next one as well. So we're thinking about not only the past research that you might have done, the archives of past research, the current qual or quant programs that you have going on as well, business analytics, transaction data, industry reports, competitive activity, social media data, and much, much more. There was just sort of this influx years ago that just started to overwhelm our clients, and this is what we heard of. And it's what we call information obesity or infobesity, where it's really easy to feel information rich. You have a ton of information at your fingertips, but knowledge poor. It's really hard to get the insights that you need when you need them and be able to apply them. And so back in 2016, our Ipsos Global Center of Curation was created to really help to tackle this challenge of being able to harness all of these multiple sources of data with the premise that there is tremendous value in all of this data that we already have, and it exists in this wider data ecosystem. And so for us, the key was really about how do we unlock the value and bring together all of these different pieces, interpret it in the context of whatever the business challenge of the day is, and then share it in a way that everyone can use. And so if we just go on to the next slide, that was kind of the situation. And then, of course, as we all know, COVID-19 happened. And what it's done is I think it's really amplified a lot of the challenges that we were facing before, we're facing now, but to an even greater extent. So I'm sure on a personal level, you've all been bombarded, as I have, by the amount of news and POVs and emails from any brand that you've ever had any sort of communication with. But as a marketer or researcher, you're probably asking questions like, with so much information available already, how do we make sense of it all for our brands? Or how do we keep up when it's changing so rapidly? Sometimes it feels like there's new information every hour, especially in this last month. With reduced budgets or capacity, how do we make the most of what we already know? Which information sources do we trust? There's so many. And do we have the full context we need to answer our business questions? And then how do we enable everyone in our organization to really make full sense of the insights and align to our actions? So if we go on to the next slide, today, more than ever, to really tame this fire hose of information, our perspective is that it's really crucial to make sure that we're not starting from zero every single time there's a business challenge to answer. So for us, this means not only collecting data, but also connecting this wealth of available information, both within your organizations, but also outside in the wider world for the fuller context. And then bringing these insights to life and across your organization so that everyone can really feel the lives of people. So what will this do? This will help us to move faster because we're not starting from zero, to be more efficient with our budgets, and hopefully get a better return on our insights as well. And this is our approach that we call curation. And to give you a bit more of an inside look, I'll let our global network of curators explain what this means.
Curation.
We like to think of curation like a symphony. We take all these various elements and we weave them together into a story that's so much more powerful than any one of those things can achieve on its own.
What curation means to these clients today is to provide a cure towards the infobesity.
It's a way to understand clients' business questions and to give appropriate answers while tapping into multiple knowledges.
We help our clients to rethink their knowledge, to answer more strategic business questions, and to get inspired by global trends so they can apply them locally and successfully.
What we do is we understand what information they already have, what they need to know, and we figure out how to incorporate new methodologies with existing information, and then we put it all together.
It's about looking at the plethora of information that you already have and seeing it through a new lens of analysis.
Sometimes we don't know what we have or what to do with it until someone else with fresh eyes and other types of expertise comes around to help us see things in a different light.
We do it by not only connecting different pieces of information to discover new insights, but also by adding a new point of view.
Curation is much more than a desk research and restructuring untapped internal client data.
It's also social listening, stakeholder interviews, adding new pieces of research to close the gaps, and using our international Ipsos network and data banks.
The opportunity to go beyond the data, to contextualize it through a protocol and analysis frameworks led by experts.
Curation is tight collaboration of anthropologists, designers, ethnographers, and semioticians, many other experts.
It's about realizing and humanizing the data that already exists in a way that only cultural experts can do.
Contextualizing the knowledge you have in today, but also for tomorrow.
Backing up our knowledge with years of research done on a category both locally and globally.
And that's how they get a story, not only that they will remember, of course, but also a story they know they can trust.
We pull out the insights, distill it into something very succinct, very powerful, very impactful.
So that the insights live on and can cascade around the organization. things are super sticky, so that anyone you socialize information with gets it immediately and would want to share it on immediately.
Brought into action to create impact and move the business forward.
Curation is going from the information age to the inspiration age, where insights are activated, not only captured.
So as you can see, this is really a passion area for us. Our role as curators is to help you to orchestrate all of these pieces along with other data sources to curate or co-curate with you to help it make sense of what this data means for your brands and help it travel across your organization. So hopefully the passion comes through from our global team there. So we wanted today to share with you some fabulous stories on how this approach can really help you to answer some questions that you might be facing today. And so these are things you can do within your organization to help you deal with infobesity. So broadly speaking, there's 4 big questions that Curation, can help you answer. And those are what the cases today are going to show you. So first, on the upper left-hand side, when you have too much information, as we've been talking about, you need to synthesize it into digested insights to help you know what we know. The second is an approach when you have multiple sources, you need experts to really help to decode these complex topics like culture, to understand the nuances of different culture or tribes, and to help to guide potential for your brands, products, and communications. In the lower left-hand side is more of our exploratory phase, when you need to understand a broader context of a market or a topic and identifying meaningful insights, trends, and opportunities. And lastly, when you need your insights to travel, to cascade and activate across the organization and ensure that they're being used and reused again. So we hope that the cases today really help to highlight these 4 areas for you. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I was just checking, but I see there's no questions for you, so we'll move on to the next part. And as Emma was saying, we're going to show you some cases for each of these solutions to Curation, and I would like to start off by handing over to... Now it's stuck. To Marion, who's going to explain a bit about decoding cultures and learning how you can apply to different cultures.
Thanks, Rosemarijn. So you can go on to the next slide. I want to start off with a quote. This is a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. I think it's particularly relevant for this time, where we're all working from home and social distancing, but it's also suitable for the topic of today, as we're talking about new insights without new research. Next slide. So just for those who don't know me, or don't know Under Armour, it's not a brand well known everywhere. A quick introduction. So just an anecdotal story here from one of the other speakers when we were testing whether or not technology was working earlier this week. I started a piece of film that was Under Armour footage, and the person on the other side was a little bit flabbergasted because she was like, "Oh, but I connect you to Heineken only." It's very true that I worked there for 12 years, but as of September, I am working with Under Armour. I am responsible for consumer insight in the EMEA region, and I'm part of the global team as well that sits in the US. So if we go on to the next slide, it explains a little bit about Under Armour. Under Armour, we say we are the human performance company that gives you the edge to push beyond any limit. Now, what does that mean? Under Armour is basically a sportswear brand that started in the basement of a grandmother of the founder in Baltimore, Maryland, which is in the US. And Baltimore is still very much at the heart of the company. So Kevin Plank still lives there. He invests a lot of money in the city, but it's also the roots of that city and the true Americanness that is part of our brand. Kevin was an American football player, and he was wondering why under his jersey, his cotton shirt was getting so wet, while under his football pants, the compression shorts he was wearing under that were not getting so wet. So he felt dragged down by his t-shirt, and that's when he developed a t-shirt that was wicking sweat way faster than cotton t-shirts, and that you could wear under your armor. So hence the name Under Armour. That started off the journey for Under Armour to make products to make athletes better. And that's still the key focus of the brand today, even though it's way beyond just American football. We say it's all about getting 1 centimeter higher, or 1 rep stronger, or a meter further, or 1/100th of a second faster. So everything matters in the pursuit of an edge, and we will try to help you get better at that. We go to the next slide. The Under Armour company has 41 offices around the world. We have regional offices in 4 regions, and as I mentioned already, the roots of the brand are very much still linked to America. The global head office remains in Baltimore, and design, communication, and innovation all mainly originate from the US. The global sports scene as such is also quite often dominated by America. They usually win the most medals during the Olympics. They have the biggest athletes that are well known. Athletes there are very well paid as well. We have 2 athletes in our portfolio that are very American, very well known, and are the 2 only athletes within our portfolio that have their own sub-brand. So we have The Rock at the top left there, and we have Steph Curry, who's a basketball player, on the bottom there. So even though the Americanness of the brand is one of the key drivers for the brand, it can also become a little bit of a pitfall when you want to grow globally. So when Under Armour developed its core target, who we call the focused performer, one of the key differentiators between the US and other markets like China and the UK and Germany, what we found is the importance of competition in sports. So it tends to be way more important for American athletes than it is in other markets. Challenging yourself without looking at others, establishing progress, getting better, setting goals and reaching those and setting new goals, that's something we see across the target and across the world. But the competitive element is a little bit more heavy on the American side. Makes sense, because in the US, when you go to school in kindergarten, you're already set up for competition. You have competitions when you're 4 in drawing, up to, you know, your athletes' years in university. There's lots of competitions you can take part of, and it's always regional, schools against schools. You can represent your school in arts or in speech or knowledge, but also in sports. And sports is also an important vehicle for people to get where they want to get in life, to get to the social networks they ambition, but also the schools they ambition, because if you're really good at sports, you'll be picked out in your university, or your college is paid for because of a scholarship. So it's a very important element of the American culture. And the way people talk about sports differently, depending on whether they are from the US or from another country, was one of the things that triggered me a lot when I started at Under Armour. And I wanted to understand more about the nuances in sports and the way it's experienced around my region. Because if we talk about EMEA, with the people in the US team, they tend to think UK, which is our biggest market, but it's also an easy comparison because the UK has a very similar feel to sports as the US, but we include the Middle East and we include Africa. We have countries that are still communist or are turning slowly away from communism. We have different religions. We have so many cultural nuances, and the world of sports is bound to be different across this region. I didn't know it, and I asked around, and it turns out not that many people within the company know beyond their own and beyond what they see within our companies as well. So I turned to Ipsos to get a better feel for sports across the region. So Rosa Marijn, if you can go to slide 7. Another one. Emma was referencing less budgets in this time of COVID. Under Armour is basically pre-COVID already struggling with less budgets. I was used to Heineken budgets. I certainly don't have those now. So I wanted to get creative. I didn't want to start up a whole new research. I knew that there were tons of documents, so we started from that. I passed on about 25 to 30 reports, which I found relevant. And we started just plowing through that, trying to identify some themes in there. From those themes, we looked at global trends and see which ones we could link to one another. And from that, we started to build a framework that was then used to basically research the researcher. So instead of turning to researchers across the globe to interview them, we asked them to fill out the strawman and give us real depth of insight, do the cultural decoding individually and feed back to the teams and have some conversation about that. And it's helping us to show that every country has their own rich sports culture, which is formed and constantly changing in the light of the culture of that country. So we're quite proud of the work that we've done. It's not finalized yet. It's called a book of knowledge. It's not so much a book, it's more like a really thick, glossy magazine. And we're going to use it to help clarify, inform, and inspire people within my region, but also in the US office, to create more top-of-mind awareness of the cultural diversities of sports in all its beauty and all its importance, because it's not okay to have commercials only showing women in their bras exercising. That may be very normal in the US. It's not so good if you want to also appeal to people in countries where religion is much stricter. So Rose Marin is going to take you through a quick flip of what it looks like. We're still editing it, so it's not anywhere near fully done. So I can't share the whole thing with you because I haven't even shared it inside yet. But I'm sure you can see that from all this work, you can get something that's really inspirational and quite helpful to get the conversations going.
All right. Thank you so much, Marion. Let me check if there's any questions that popped up for you. No, I don't see any questions yet, so I think it was all clear. Yeah, thank you so much, Marion. So I think that gives us quite a good idea of what curation can look like if you do apply it to different cultures, and what output can also look like of curation. So now let's turn to knowing what we know, and Anne is going to tell us about finding your way in a whole sense of information, a whole lot of information around COVID-19.
Hi everyone, hello from the UK. Do you want to, must I just shout next, Rosamund? I think Emma's touched on this point when she introduced curation, and I think she's touched on a whole bunch of points about how great curation is, and how great it is, particularly when one is not only sitting in an environment where things are changing so quickly, but it's something that we're living on that is confronting the type of business questions that we are having. And I think that every single company has had this particular feeling. Suddenly, beautiful laid out plans from last year and that had to, either fast track or derail and go on another rail or turn around. And if you can go to the next slide. GSK was literally being approached by so many people. I think they've got about 2,500 providers, and what I mean by that, it's all the way from research to people who have a particular point of view, from media agencies and that. And these 2,500 sources were sending them 2, 3, 4, 5 emails a day on COVID. And if you do the math, it's roughly about 12,500 emails COVID related per day. what was happening is that because there are so many different point of views out there, and because every single member of the organization were getting different point of views, it started to create some tensions about what is it that we need to look at and how do we look forward in a very congruent way. So we started having conversations with them, and our brief was very simple. It was help us cut through the noise, you know, with knowledge that inspires us, or put people at the heart of what really matters. This is very important for GSK. It's part of the, you know, global mantra, just to not talk about consumers, but really understand and get close to people. And they wanted us to help them via this and via this collaborative endeavor. Hello? Sorry, I thought somebody wanted to add something, which they're more than welcome to. And get something that would help them plan ahead for what we are all dubbing the new normal. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the journey that we've embarked on with GSK, and we already around 7 weeks with them, is we provide them with a fully interactive weekly digests, and the LTCH stands for Leadership Teams, you know, in consumer health. And it starts off with them, but then they very also quickly cascade this particular information down all channels within the GSK consumer healthcare team, so that, you know, every single one person that has an agenda that's COVID related or being impacted by COVID, so that they can make smart decisions and decisions that are aligned to what the business wants to stand for. So every week, the little tiles that you see differ, because every single week we have a topic. So if you can have a look on the right hand side, the very first edition was about setting the scene and introducing it. The second one, we very quickly went to, you know, sentiments and behaviors of people that were in lockdown. We also focused on communication. Another week we did a Zoom on the US. Then we went back to Europe, because Europe was starting to come out of lockdown. We also looked at, you know, how is COVID and things like social distancing impacting, you know, someone's shopper mission? Are people starting to think about recession and what's happening? And we are going to go back to, you know, China, and then also have a look at experts, and what we mean by that is pharmacists and all of that. But every single week, it's been introduced by somebody else within the organization. It also creates buy-in, not only at the very top level, but then also at all the way down through to the different workforces that supports GSK through this. Next slide, please. And I'll give you a little bit of a taste. So I can't share any of the information, but what's unusual about this is that, you know, I'm leading a little curation team. I think we're about 2 people, apart from me. And we are, yes, working for Ipsos, but we are independent curators in this time. And what this means is that with the knowledge of all the other resources that provides GSK with information, we basically take everyone's particular point of view, and we find the golden threads that are not only aligned to the new and forever evolving GSK's business objectives, but we also make use of, you know, sources that are out there. We quite like provoking, you know, the research that people provide you by reading, you know, what the World Health Organization says, or somebody who has a particular point of view that is quite pointed. And we are trying to say to the clients, don't always take the research, at face value. Sometimes you need to think slightly differently, and looking at different point of views and opposing point of views is going to make you stronger, because it gets you to think. Yes, everything is backed up by data, so we're not going to suddenly go, the Sun newspaper tells you, but it is sound sources of information. We look for congruency also, and then what we do is we bring it to life. We bring it to life not only via certain videos that we find. Sometimes the client has got quite a varied sources of research. And we're trying to make it, so that any person who's got ADHD, could even read it. It's super quick, it's super snappy, it's super engaging, it's full of links, so that if you want to be able to click on something that you find as a person super interesting, you can. But similarly, if you just want to get the top down or low down on what's happening, you can also read this particular weekly digest in 5 minutes flat if you want to. Next slide. Okay, I think it's all well said and done if it doesn't work really well if it's just going to be a one-way street. So what I mean by that is that, yes, we are Ipsos curators, so we're not going to punt only Ipsos-centric information. The collaboration bit is super important here. It's not only a collaboration with clients, but it's also a collaboration with research agencies. So every single Monday, I get to talk to my competitors, and I get to talk to them about, do you have this particular research? Do you have that particular research? And this collaborative thinking is also about, me picking up the phone and saying to my client, there's something in here, I don't know what it is. What do you think it could mean? So it's a very much a two-way street. I don't even know if it's two-way, it's multiple-way streets with so many people. So it's an effort, and we just a little bit of a hub here. We also, I think, have very, very important weekly calls with senior stakeholders. And why that is because they are people who know very well what the new business questions are. They know where the business can go and where it cannot go. But it's also decision makers. And also when we want to inspire and inform the workforce that's sitting behind an organization, I think they need to be also inspired by their senior stakeholders. What's really interesting here also, because COVID is moving so quickly and people are reacting it so differently because of different cultures, because of different government supports and so forth, the business questions that, big companies are having at the beginning of the year, they're forever evolving also, because we are sitting in uncertain times in a way, or we rather are in a certain times that things change on very quickly, and we know that the changes are coming. But I think that this alignment to business question is super important, because otherwise it's just more noise, more information, and you don't do anything for it. Other thing that's super important for something like this to succeed is that the client really work really hard to make sure that there is a dissemination plan in place. And what we mean by that is, yes, it's going to go to the central teams, but then also those central teams need to be able to send them on very quickly, thinking about, we've got, I don't know, it's like a weekly spotlight every week. COVID is also moving very quickly, so people need to be able to keep the finger on the pulse. And this is me in essence.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to collect the questions at the end. So I'm now going to pass on to Patricia to tell a bit more about contextualizing and how curation can help to pick out opportunities that are relevant to your business.
All right, thank you. Yes, so similar to the GSK example, we actually received a request from a client in the candy category, and they asked us to help them understand all of the COVID-19 insights in light of their business. And since we have a lot of information available written by many different experts around the globe, we decided to curate some of the information we had available at the time to answer a number of our clients' questions. So what we did was we created a short story based on what we've seen, which started with understanding, okay, how is COVID-19 impacting people's behavior? People are spending some more time at home, some more time with their family, by themselves, which also creates some anxiety and some stress. But we also saw that a lot of people are developing new routines and rituals. And we saw that, okay, what do people actually expect from brands? And what can brands do as a reaction to this crisis? Should they be quiet, or should they actually react in a specific way? Well, you can imagine being quiet is not the answer, but the focus, well, what we saw in some of the white papers created by our advertising teams was that people are looking for brands to give them a feeling of security and a feeling of positivity. And our branding experts also came up with a few ways to react as a brand, which was like, for example, giving comfort or providing an act of kindness, or also just helping people pass the time they have available. And that's what we also provided some inspiration, which is on the next slide. So we collected some inspiration that we found of different brands doing in these past few months as a reaction to the crisis. One of my favorite examples is the one from Ketchup, where they basically created a puzzle of 570 pieces, which is all red, which can help people to pass their time when they're really bored. But there's also other examples, like for example from Under Armour, that they are helping making protective gear. You had a number of beer brands that provided hand sanitizers. And you have a bunch of brands providing virtual activities for their consumers. So this was a way to inspire them to see, okay, maybe there's something that's interesting for you that you can build upon. And then we looked at what are the different phases that people will go through. And this was based on discussions that our global experts had with different people around the world, and especially also with our colleagues in China who have been going through different types of phases. And of course, the first phase was the lockdown phase. But what we realized is after this lockdown phase, there's still most likely quite a long phase to come, which will be the new normal. But even in that new normal, there will be different phases in which people will most likely behave differently. And the first new normal phase is the low touch phase, which is what most of us are starting to go through now. But there will still be people will still less often go to restaurants or not yet go to restaurants, but also there will be some financial restrictions for a lot of people, which creates some new behavior and also will impact our client category quite a bit. So what we saw in the lockdown phase for our candy category is that people are going for a surge of indulgence. So a lot of people are snacking a lot at home, getting some fun feeling, but afterwards in the low touch phase, you see that people might start to realize, okay, but I also have to be somewhat healthy, and I don't want to overdo it. I need to watch my weight, for example. And most likely in the next phases, people will also, especially in the candy category, be worried about sharing different foods, because often candy comes in a huge bag that you can share with different people or different kids, and people might get worried about that. So these were a number of things that we thought about of hypotheses to focus on. But we also realized that we can come up with all kinds of things and types of ideas on how behavior will change, but will it really be will this be a long-lasting impact? So we looked at a number of our global trends research that has been done, and there we see that people don't actually change their behavior that quickly. We've seen that in when there are major events like 9/11 or the financial crisis in 2008, the major trends and the big evolutions are all showing flat lines, so it stays the same. So behavior only changes when there's real motivation and people actually have the ability to change, and it happens frequent enough. But does that mean then COVID won't have any impact? No, probably not, because there's a lot of things and trends that have been happening over the last few years, which can be accelerated thanks to COVID or due to COVID. Like, for example, what we see is, or what we've seen before, is that people are more and more focused on health, which might even be more increased because of COVID-19. But also vegetarianism could be increased or accelerated by COVID-19. So based on all of that information, we developed some of our hypotheses on what we actually expect to be long-lasting changes, of which one, we expect the travel industry to change quite a bit, mainly when we think about business travel, because everyone's now realizing we can do everything virtually, we can do a lot of meetings online, and it works quite well. So do we really need to travel 12 hours to go to a face-to-face meeting? But also e-commerce, online shopping is now much more common. People are really getting used to it, so it will probably have an additional uplift. But also for our clients specifically, we looked at, okay, what are our hypotheses? What are the things we expect to change? Will people continue to indulge, or will they go back to the idea of I need to be more healthy? And what does that mean for our client? And how will people want to share? Do they want to share a big bag, or is it much more about, no, I want individual packages? And does that actually work with the environment? So this way we try to give them some ideas, some inspiration to think about what is the impact that can be for our category. And based on this, yeah, they might adjust their strategy, but they can also do more research to figure out, like, okay, what's the focus? What is the behavior I really want to understand?
All right. Thank you so much, Patricia. So once you actually have your insights, you've gained them, we also have an application for curation of making them travel within your organization. So I'd like to hand the word over to Janneke from Nutricia.
Thanks, Roosmarijn. Hi, people. Yes, so our journey with curation started a couple of years ago, in 2017, actually. And if you move to the next slide, and I can tell you why. Listen to your mom. It's the best advice you can get. And but seriously, in 2017, we relooked at the way we were doing our research, etc. And we said, you know what? We need to start listening more and listening better. And there were a couple of initiatives that we took for that. And one part of that was curation with the help of an insight cloud made by Ipsos for us. And if we move to the next slide, then I'll give you a bit of a view of what it looks like today. These little dots you see on your screen, those are all the insights that we have currently in our cloud. Because what we built is an online cloud where we curate all our insights, and where we also wanted to be able to link insights from various sources. We kicked it off in 2017 with 30 reports that were transformed into small, easily digestible key insights, and we put those on this board to start off with. And since then, every report from every research that we have, we also scan it for the key insights, and those key insights we log in our Insight Cloud. And what do we use them for? Well, I'll show you on the next slide. Because on the one hand, and I think it was mentioned before already, I already heard Emma, for instance, mention this as well. One of the key things, of course, if you're an insight manager, then there's always the question, what do we know about? And so, for instance, in my case, that's, okay, Janneke, what do we know about bio food for babies? Or what do we know about the insecurities moms have? Or we don't think we know anything about dads. What do we know about dads? Well, normally what we would do is, of course, we would go to our giant Excel, have a look, ask some colleagues who've been around for 10 years. We'd call Ipsos if they knew which reports we had. And now we don't need to do that anymore, because now, actually, give me 10 minutes and I can tell you everything we know about a specific topic, because I can look it up in my online environment. What we do there also is a bit of research recycling, because every bit of information that goes on there, we also tag it. We tag it with all the words that we think may be relevant. And that means that all of a sudden you thought you had a research on pack design, but it turns out it also had a tidbit of information about the emotions that parents have when they start weaning their child. And this is how we recycle also information. And it means that in our case, every project we started off by looking at our Insight Cloud. We started off by looking at what we already know. And that makes for a more streamlined briefing that goes out to an agency. Sometimes we even don't need to do any research because we know enough at that stage. But if you don't, it's way more clear where your gaps in knowledge are and where you want to zoom into. This is, of course, very nice for the ad hoc part, but we also have some continuous processes. And Roosmarijn, if you move to the next slide, I'll tell you more about that. Because, of course, we have business planning. And every year before our marketeers and our medical marketeers start making their plans, we need to give them the status quo. We need to tell them what the key insights are of our business. And this is where we use the other part of our Insight Cloud, because it also really helps us out in connecting the dots. So what we do on a yearly basis, and both Emma and Roosmarijn know this because they're on our team for this one, we download literally all the insights that we have. And at the moment, that's around 350, if I'm not mistaken. And we look at them from a bit of a distance. So we zoom out a bit and we try to really find the red thread. So what is it about these insights that's really touching us? And it's a bit what I heard earlier, huh? Not just taking these insights at face value, but looking at the layer behind. And this is what we also do with it on a yearly basis. And this helps us because it actually forms the foundation of, for instance, our category vision, where we merge the insights that come from our Insight Cloud together with global trends, etc. So this is a sneak peek of what we do with our cloud. And if we move to the next slide, we really believe a couple of years in that this solution helps us listen better to our target audience, which in the case of Nutricia mainly is moms and moms-to-be. And the reason for that is that it gives you a view also on the topics that you didn't per se ask. It's the stuff that you see, that you can read between the lines. And this really helps us to do that well. It also enables our full business to very easily find the stuff they need in an intuitive way, because you can just type in any keyword that you think may be relevant, and it will just spit out what's relevant, but also the topics that are connected to the topic you were searching for. And all in all, I would say it's quite insightful. So this is a bit our Nutricia journey with curation.
All right, thank you so much, Janneke. So hopefully these stories and cases have inspired you a little bit today to see what kind of applications curation has, and also to maybe give you some confidence that there is a lot to learn from what you know already, and also to prepare for the new normal. So as always, feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. Let me also open the floor now to questions that you may have for our speakers. You can type them in, or you can unmute your microphone and ask questions. So I see we have one question about in what way the cultural background of researchers themselves impacts findings and insights. I think that's a very interesting question, and I think that's also something to take into account. And that's also quite often why we do ask different moderators in different countries for their views on things. Emma, maybe you want to add on the diverse community that we have?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question because when we're doing any sort of analysis, but especially I think in curation or a cultural analysis, it's important to understand that we all come with our own biases, right? We're all geared towards different ways. So for us, I would say there's two main ways that we help to make sure that we're not being biased in our view as we curate. One is exactly as you said, Rosemarin, looking to create diverse curation teams. So not only that include our Ipsos team of curators, but also, of course, our clients, and then different people that we can bring together with different points of views. So we have both that outside in, but also the inside out point of view. I would say the second thing, though, that's really important is making sure that all of the data we bring together does come from many different sources to make sure that we're understanding the full perspective. So like my outside in, inside out, there's also a top down. So I think when we're curating, it's important to do things like understand stakeholder interviews, right? What's being said there, look at past reports, and that gives a certain view. But then also going the other way to be more bottom up. So whether that be like looking at social intelligence data to see what are real people talking about, expert interviews, people in the field. So trying to, I think, triangulate all of those different sources helps to make sure that we're not just going down one particular point of view. I was just Anna and I were actually chatting the other day, and she had a really interesting example of this. Anna, I don't know if you'd want to share related to the work that you're doing on COVID and finding some new angles.
I can't remember what we talked about, but yeah, I think that for any type of research, I think I've been asked this particular question, you know, with regards to focus groups or any of those things. I think that one of the great things about curation is that you work, well, in the UK office, we work in super different teams. We're not all lily white English. I certainly am not. And, you know, making sure that the teams that are working on your projects are looking at, you know, things with different eyes. I think that the longer we've been in the game, we also very cognizant, you know, to question ourselves and ask ourselves, are we looking at this, or are we not even noticing something? Because sometimes we've got biases, you know. But it is about having conversations. It's about having also the audacity to be able to ask, you know, our other clients or even other researchers, you know, I see it in this way. Is this the right way to see it? Or I am making an assumption about China, you know, don't take offense, please, but this is my Eurocentric, you know, personality coming through, you know, am I seeing it in the right way? And then they actually push back, and it's about always trying to understand it from various point of view. And I think that, Emma, your point on triangulation is super, super important also.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Then I have a question for Janneke. We have someone asking how you extract the insights from the reports and mentioning that maybe it can be quite labor intensive.
Oh, yes, it can. it definitely can. Well, yes, the insights indeed are handcrafted. So that takes time, and we're anxiously awaiting some sort of data mining, text mining tool to facilitate for us. But until that's possible, actually, you need to indeed do it by hand for every insight. That actually isn't really a big problem. The only issue we had is when we started it up and all of a sudden wanted 30 reports logged. that means you've got a big backlog and a lot of stuff to do. But what we do nowadays is with every report, actually with every research briefing, we already include in the briefing that part of the deliverables needs to be a format in which we want specific key insights to be logged alongside a report or a workshop or whatever we're having. Then once the project is finished and we've all had our internal discussions on it, that's when we pinpoint the key insights that need to go on the platform. And that makes it a little less tedious, because indeed, if you've got a large chunk of reports that you want to put on there, you need to set aside quite some time to be able to do that indeed.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Janneke. So I think that concludes our webinar for today. If any more questions come in, then feel free to share them with us and we can collect them and get back to you. And also to let you know, we will be sharing the recordings of today at the beginning of next week. So thank you so much, everyone.